Hi, I'm Chris from Future Music. We're here with Elektron and Cenk, who's going to show us their new product in a second. It's NAMM 2014, and we've got a brand new piece of hardware from Elektron, so I'll hand you over to Cenk.
Hi, I'm Cenk from Elektron Music Machines, and I'm here to show you our new drum machine. This is the Analog Rytm. It's turned out to be a boxing video as well as a review. So here it is. You have 12 pads, all backlit, and you can have various colors. You have individual outputs for all your tracks. You have also a stereo input. You have a USB port and a MIDI, all the things you would expect. But yeah, let's hook it up and see what it does. So we have the machine plugged in and turned on. This unit is a 8-voice analog drum machine. And this is how it sounds like. Notice that you have 12 pads, but you share 8 voices with it. So, for example, you cannot trigger the closed hi-hat and the open hi-hat at the same time, or the cymbal and the cowbell. So they kind of share the same engine, but you control it in a different way. So I'll start playing around a little performance that I did, so you can get the idea of how it sounds. So I muted my tracks, so in this mode you can mute and unmute your things. You have a performance mode where you can assign individual parameters from all the tracks to your 8 parameter knobs here, and then play around, and yeah, you'll hear it now. So now I'll go through detailed parameters of each track. So you have the bass drum track, and this is the bass drum synthesis, and this is all analog, of course. And you have your parameters for depth, tune, and all the things that you would expect from an analog drum machine. But what sets this unit really apart from other analog drum machines is that you can actually layer a sample within the same track. So I have the kick sound that I made up, the analog sound, and now I could go to the sample page and feed in a different type of sound within the same track. So I could select from the, there you go. So I could assign any of these sounds to this track. Or you could even pick up like a bass waveform that I've loaded in here, and there you go. So I could start editing that. So I have the kick as well as the synth bass tone. You can also put bit reduction on your samples, make it even nastier maybe. We could go to the next page, which is the filter. You have an analog filter, a multi-mode filter for each of the tracks, and also you have an analog overdrive for each of the tracks as well. Yeah, so that's okay sound. So I can now skip to the snare track and mess around with that. So let's see, this is the default synthesis for snare. Start editing that a bit. And now I could go to the sample track and sample section, sorry, not the track, pick another sample. Let's see, some kind of clap with it, but I'll make it a bit weird. You can do all these type of things that you would expect. Yeah, so something like that. We could also try the overdrive here maybe. And the overdrive is actually before the filter, so I can like filter the overdriven sound. Yeah, so maybe I could like create a sequence of this now, so I could put the click track on. And I could maybe add some other tracks. Maybe add some swing as well. You have master effects, reverb and delay, which are digital, obviously. You could route them. You can route any of the tracks into those effects. So this is the snare routed into the reverb. It's got a really nice reverb. Could maybe add some cowbell in there. I can record the automation of the parameters into the sequencer real time. Also, the sequencer allows to have polyrhythmic sequences. So each of the tracks can have their own length. So I could set this track to play 14 steps. 13. So we could look further into the sound design. So we could pick the bass tom. Let's see. Kind of sounds like a bit of an 808-ish type of thing. Maybe we could use the distortion overdrive. This is the sound that I really like. What's neat about this machine sequencer is that you have the parameter locks. So you can like put in trigs into the sequencer, and each trig can have its different setting. So I'll change values for the filter envelope, and maybe even the filter settings, and maybe even the tune of the kick. So you get some kind of like a melodic bass drum. And I'll start making some other things maybe. Each of the tracks offers you an LFO where you can assign it to any of the parameters that track offers. So let's assign the LFO to the filter. And maybe add some other tracks. We could also look at the master effects, which are the distortion and the compressor. They're both analog. So I will load up a different pattern here and mess around with the settings so you get an idea of how they sound. Let's slow the BPM down. So this is the analog distortion. So you can get it really dirty if you wanted to, and then go on the compressor page and let's mess around with these settings. Yeah. So that's how they sound like. And you have all the external outputs, which is really important in an analog drum machine in this caliber. You also have the external, you have also the inputs, which is the stereo inputs. Though this machine does not sample from an input, you load your samples through the USB slots. The MIDI out also supports DIN sync 24 and 48, so you can sync up your older sequencers and drum machines. That kind of covers it, I think. And you also have the plus drive in the unit, so you have a lot of memory. You can save up to 128 projects, a lot of sounds, a lot of samples and all that stuff. You also have a scene and a scene section. This section is not actually available right now, but you will be able to control your sounds through the pads. It's kind of like a work in progress. And you also have the chromatic mode, so you can play your analog sounds and your samples chromatically and record them into the sequencer. Yeah, that kind of covers it.
Right, so I've sat back down to ask a few questions, really. I mean, first off, what sort of sets this apart, would you say, compared to sort of other drum machines? Because there's been kind of a bit of a renaissance in, well, hardware generally, but also, you know, drum machines and analog drum machines. What would you say makes it different?
I think the one that really set this machine apart is that it has the analog and also the digital side of it. So it's kind of like a hybrid analog drum machine. So for example, on the bass drum track, I have the analog synthesis of a bass drum. And now at the same time, I have the sample section of that track. So I can mix and match an analog sound as well as a sample, a digital sample, and then filter them using the analog filter and the analog overdrive. So that gives you the edge of the both worlds, the analog as well as the digital. Another thing to mention is that you have these analog circuits inside this machine that is making the bass drum and the snare drum and the clap synthesis. Now, they are controlled digitally. So in the future, we can upgrade to different type of software, different type of engines in the machine to manipulate these analog circuits. So what you hear and see now is just only the beginning. We have a lot of plans that we can implement. For example, we just recently added the FM bass drum. So you also have an analog FM bass drum as well as the normal, 909, 808-ish type of kick drums as well that you would expect from an analog drum machine. So that is the one that sets it apart, and as well as you have the digital effects, master effects, as well as the analog master effects as well. So it gives you the full package of the analog and the digital world in one box.
So another thing is, I sort of was wondering how it fits in with the other Elektron synths, because it's sort of similar size and such. I mean, where do you see people who have existing units like the Analog 4? Does it work in harmony?
Yeah, if you have an Analog 4, this is the best companion you can probably get for it, I think. I mean, not just Analog 4, if you have a machine drum, even, of course, they're both drum machines, but the machine drum is digital and this is analog based, and they both create sounds that each other don't. I think there's some kind of a very interesting harmony between the Elektron products when you're using them together. Like if you have the octa track here running your samples, and this is making your analog beats, and you run them through each other and applying effects to each other. I think there's a really magical harmony there. The reason for this harmony is that the interface, once you know one of them, you kind of like know the others, because the interface layout is very similar. If you look at the pictures, you have your parameter knobs, the sequencer there, and the transport controls, they're all the same kind of design. So, it works really well with each other, as well as the other units, of course. But when you have a few Elektron boxes, mixing them up, it's the perfect live performance and a studio tool, and a tool to inspire you for a long time, I think.
And speaking of studio tool, I mean, looking at like the connections, is it USB MIDI as well?
Yes, it is USB MIDI. Yes, and this is used for sample transfer. Yes.
So there's a piece of software that you sort of drag and drop onto that transfers the sample?
Yes,
okay.
We have the software on our website, C6, that handles all the data transfers between Elektron units.
Okay. And how else do you think people would be using this in the studio? I mean, multiple outs to multiple ins, that kind of stuff?
Well, it has a multiple outs, so all the tracks that you see can be recorded individually on your DAW or your however you're working in your studio. That is a great feature, I think. So that you can compress your bass drum with your favorite compressor, the snare drum goes through your favorite reverb, the rim shot goes through your favorite VST. The possibilities are endless when you have the multiple outputs there, which is very important. You also have the stereo inputs, which the inputs, the audio signal goes through the analog compressor. So let's say you have an analog 4 here, and the output goes through here, and you're making your beats, and you're making your bass lines, and you're using the compressor, and you get that kind of, you're baking the acid cake or whatever.
So that compressor is a master effect, a master bus effect.
Yes,
okay.
Right, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so it sort of glues everything together when you've got another device as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess like other Elektron units, long-term plans for firmware upgrades and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, as I mentioned, this is a hybrid machine. It's an analog drum machine, but it's run with the software that is being coded, and you have these analog circuits, and the developers can write interesting ways to control these circuits. As I said, the FM bass drum just made it on its way here, and it sounds great and different to the normal standard kick drum that we have in there. So, imagine that you're going to have a different type of snare drum, the bass tom, and so on. So the future is quite bright for the machine, I would say. Yeah.
Great. So when can we get it, and how much is it?
We're aiming to release it at Q1, and the price is €14.89.
Okay.
Yeah, which is similar to the Machine Drum UW, the current pricing. Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for stopping by and showing us.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you. Thank you.